Mica Galvao or JT Torres?
I'll say personally that Brandon has been just studying ADCC, getting ready to commentate. So he's been going back, watching all these dudes' matches in ADCC formats, and he thinks JT Torres is unbeatable in this rule set. So he thinks he's the guy. I'm taking Mica Galvao. I think Mica is, outside of Gordon Ryan, the best grappler in the world right now.
What is up, Jiu-Jitsu fans? And happy ADCC week. It is a big week. Joining me right now is a man that knows a ton about the subject. It is Matt Skaff, a 10th Planet black belt, a coach at 10th Planet Decatur, or Decatur. Decatur?
Yeah, Decatur, yeah.
Decatur. Okay, I'm the worst at remembering which one it is. I think Decatur is some type of mythical creature that I keep mixing it up. But yes, he is a head coach there. And he's also the host of the Grappling Discourse, which is how I ran into his page, because you just know so much about ADCC and the world of grappling in general. You also competed in the 2014 ADCC trials, got to the quarterfinals. So you understand the anxiety, the pressure, the atmosphere that happens at ADCC. But can you tell me what it was like competing then and what you think it'll be like now, the difference?
Oh, man, that's honestly, the sports has changed so much. It might as well be two completely different events. So the event I did was in Charleston, West Virginia. And I mean, it was in West Virginia, which is not known for its grappling. I have no clue how ADCC, the trials, ended up being in West Virginia. But regardless, I have family up there in Charleston, the capital. And so I had a spot to stay. I was a young, hungry purple belt at the time, and I was competing all the time. And I was super excited to test myself out. And I believe there was like 32 people in the division. And so I got really lucky as a purple. I got a bye in the first round. It was 32. It was somewhat like there was enough. I'm not quite sure. It couldn't have been 32, I guess, because that would have made a perfect bracket. So it was maybe like 28 or 29. I just know that only a couple of people got by. So I got a bye in the first round as a purple belt, which was perfect. And I watched Nathan Orchard, who's one of my good buddies. He had to face Enrico Coco, who ended up winning the trials, and he's who I ended up losing to later on. But they had to go first round. So there wasn't seating like there is today. It was just like, hey, we're going to just randomly give people buys. And I was one of them. And anyways, 32 people, no fans. I mean, my grandparents came because they were just like in town. Like I said, I had family there. So they were like one of the only non-coaches and athletes in attendance. And it was a great day. I did very well for a purple belt. Gordon Ryan, that was the first trials he competed at. I believe he was a purple belt as well. He ended up losing in the semifinals. I think he lost in the semis, but he looked really good that day. And I remember seeing Gary Tonin coaching this guy, and people were like, yeah, this guy's like him. And then there was Eddie Cummings as well. And I didn't know. I knew who Gary Tonin was from EBI, but so Gary was a big name in the sport, but there were two dudes, and one was Gordon Ryan. He was a lot skinnier at the time. He doesn't look anything like he does now. He still was the same height, obviously, in length, but he's nowhere near as jacked as he is coming into this ADCC. But the sport, man, it's they've sold over 11,000 tickets for this upcoming ADCC. So from that trials with just my grandparents basically in attendance to this one where there's, probably, if I had to guess, going to be 14 to 15,000 in attendance come Saturday. It's grown a ton.
And I think you mentioned on one of your podcasts that they supposedly put in like close, I don't know, is it $1 million or $1 billion into the production? I can't remember, but like that sounds like they're really trying to make it a big event.
So I think last ADCC, they put $1 million into the production. So Mo Jazim, he is the head ADCC organizer, him. And then it's funny, there's a bunch of refs. So at a time, the only ADCC refs were from Finland. And so that's why we had to skip ADCC 2021, is because they still had COVID policies where they weren't able to travel. So we weren't able to do the trials. If you don't know much about ADCC, you have to understand like the rules are very complicated. It's not like there's a lot of ins and outs. You got to know the ins and outs of the rules. And so for a long time, the only refs were from Finland. And so they actually had ADCC 2017 in Finland 2019 was in the United States, and then they were supposed to be 2021, had to skip it because of COVID. So the 2019, they spent $1 million. And I know this one, I'm sure they've spent, I know Mo said that just in ticket sales, I think the first day they did over $1 million in ticket sales the first day.
Wow, that's so nice to hear for the jiu-jitsu community, because you always hear about how jiu-jitsu is too slow, it's too boring, it'll never get big. But evidently, a lot of people are really hyped for this one. And it has to do a little bit with, I feel like, the pushback from all the COVID stuff. Now everyone's like extra excited to get this in, but also all the fighters in this are so fun, so much fun to like pick apart, basically. And that's where I want to get your opinion. We're going to start with the ladies. We're going to start with the 60 and over kg. All right, you have your returning champion, Gabby Garcia, and then the trials winners and the girls that are invited. The names that I'm most familiar with are Gabby Garcia of Alliance, Elizabeth Clay, and Kendall Rusing. So what is your take on this division, and who do you think is the favorite that everyone agrees is the favorite going in?
Yeah, Gabby Garcia is, for a long time, was the favorite. I mean, she's a 3 or 4 time champion, and coming into most events, she was the favorite. But honestly, the past couple of years, especially if you just look at her who's number one performances, Gabby hasn't been performing the best. Her competition has caught up to her, and I think a couple girls have actually passed her. The best female, in my opinion, over 60 in that division is Rafael Guedes from Team Atos. Rafaela is a beast. She ended up winning. She won that 8-woman division at that Who's Number One when they did that those brackets for the $30,000. And she's a beast. She can do it all. Very, very good. Her, Amy Campo, who won the first North American trials, the East Coast trials. She's very, very good. Kendall Rusing's been training at 10th Planet, as well as her home, Gracie Baja. But I think she's been doing a lot of her camp over there with the Freaks over in San Diego. Yeah. So those are kind of the 3 that I think are my favorites. But I think Rafaela, to me, like of all the divisions, I think Rafaela is the best bet to win. I'm talking about all men and women. Rafaela is a really strong favorite, in my opinion. And I think she gets the job done this weekend and takes home ADCC gold.
Wow. Hot takes over here. I'm very interested to see how Kendall does, just because she's been so open about her injuries and different back issues or whatever she's going with. So what are some of the fights in this division that you really want to see? Because they haven't gotten the brackets out. So what do you think is like a fun stylistic matchup that you'd want to see in that division?
I mean, Gabby Garcia, until she's beaten, she's the champion. She's the returning champion. So honestly, any of the girls with Gabby Garcia, they want to take her out, because taking Gabby's scalp is a big deal. Like if you can knock out the legend, Gabby Garcia, regardless if you actually end up winning the whole thing, you're going to be happy, right? So any matches that feature Gabby, I want to see Amy versus Rafaela, though. I think Amy versus Rafaela is just a great matchup. Now, here's the thing about ADCC. We don't know the brackets. And so especially, I mean, honestly, if you're a betting person, because I know people like have odds out there and everything for the division, well, you can't make a bet until you see the divisions. So if I had to pick like the one match, I want to see Amy versus Rafaela.
Very cool. And another interesting division with, I feel like, much more speed is a woman under 60 kg. You have the returning champion, Bianca Basilo of Atos. Atos is just pumping out so many like big names, and it's so fun to watch all of them kill it. But my favorite is Fionn Davies, just because her reaction when she beat Bia Mesquita, I thought was so wholesome and such a motivation for all girls in jiu-jitsu and men too, I'm sure. But she's my favorite. And then another one who obviously got a lot of attention at the trials is Brianna State Marie. So when you're looking at this division, what do you think is going to be, who do you think is the biggest favorite?
This is one of my favorite divisions. And I don't think people understand, like if you didn't watch ADCC 2019, this was one of the best brackets, one of the most exciting. You saw, as you just already mentioned, a Fionn Davies versus Bia Mesquita match where, I mean, Fionn broke her arm. Like it was a nasty arm bar, and her reaction afterwards, I mean, she beat the female GOAT. I think Bia's the female GOAT. But then she ended up losing in the final to a really nasty toe hold by Bianca. So this division's really, really tough. We've got some newcomers in there, Brianna Steve Marie. We've got the returning champion. We've got the female GOAT in Bia. We got Fionn, who's looked incredible. In my opinion, I think Fionn gets it done this time. I really do.
Wow.
I think Fionn gets it done. She's every time I see Fionn, she gets better and better. Now, here's the thing. Since COVID hit, a lot of the European athletes haven't really been able to train. Not train. They haven't been able to travel and compete. So we haven't seen Fionn compete against a lot of these top women. So of all the matches, like I want to see Brianna Stay Marie versus Fionn Davies. I think that is just an incredible match. That's one of my matches like of the tournament. I really hope that goes down. I think it's going to be a barn burner. We got two submission hunters going at it. But this is a tough division because all the returning top four are back. You know, we got the champion return. We've got Elvira, who nobody's talking about. She new mother. So how does that play in? You know, she just had a child recently. And so she's dealing with motherhood as well as preparing for ADCC. So, you know, she's a warrior. But yeah, this women's division is a lot of people sleep on it, especially guys. And this is a must-watch division, in my opinion.
Yes, it's highly entertaining. And I'm kind of curious because when I think of some big names in jiu-jitsu, I think of Jessica Khan and Danielle Kelly. Is it just because this weight class is a little bit bigger for them that we're not seeing them at ADCC? Or is it just because Danielle is kind of doing one championship stuff and different things?
This is one of the things that I think we've talked about. You know, people, myself and my instructor, Brandon McCatherine, he's going to be commentating at ADCC. And so we've talked about, it's pretty cool. But we've talked about it, like they need more women's divisions. You know, there's 2 women's division and there's only 8 in each one. I thought the women's trial was incredible. The West Coast women's trial, some of those matches that took place were just as good as any of the guys' matches. So I think it's time to either give them another, or like 1 or 2 more divisions, because I mean, you've got basically it's over 130 and under 130, and that's not enough, you know. So you're mentioning these people like Jessica Khan and Danielle Kelly. Well, they compete at 115, and you're giving up 15-20 pounds. And I know Danielle Kelly's small. I mean, she doesn't cut weight to make 115. I mean, she's a small 115er, so it's just not her weight class. I mean, you're talking about Fionn Davies probably has 20-25 pounds on both of those girls.
That definitely makes sense that they're not going to be in it. But hopefully, would you think in 2024 that we start to see more brackets or not more brackets, but more divisions in the female?
I hope so. Divisions? I hope so. As a fan of jiu-jitsu and as a coach who works with a couple of females, one in particular that I'm hoping to, you know, like that she's in the next ADCC. I would like to see, I mean, she competes at, so like my student, her name's Nicky Jackson. She did the trials and she ended up losing a really close decision match to Trinity Pun. And I think it was the Sweet 16 or whatever. But anyways, she normally competes at 115, Nicky, like she's small. And so it was a real big, like she didn't have to cut any weight. She came in 5 pounds under the allotted weight. So I would personally, as a fan and coach, like to see 1 or 2 more divisions added.
Yeah, that definitely would be awesome. So those are the only 2 divisions for the ladies we have to cover. Now we're going to get into 66 kg, which is pretty interesting, pretty open because the reigning champ, defending champ isn't coming back this time. So you have a lot of room for the new names like Cole Abate, who trains over here in Orange County, Keith Krikorian, who I know has been on your podcast quite a few times, and then a bunch of other big names that I feel like were invited, AJ Agazarm, and of course, Gary Tonin. So tell me your thoughts on Gary Tonin moving from a higher division and going to a lower one. With all his experience, do you think he could come out on top this weekend?
A lot of people have Gary as their number 1 seed. As I said, we're not going to get to see the brackets until the day before, but a lot of people have Gary as their number 1 seed, and I can definitely see that. I mean, Gary's a legend. Gary, he's got wins over some of the biggest names in the sport at a much bigger weight class. I mean, I remember watching Gary do an EBI that Gordon Ryan had to pull out of. Gordon Ryan pulled out of the 205 EBI, and Gary Tonin stepped in like 30 pounds underweight, and he won. He beat Vinny Magalesh in the finals, and Vinny's fighting in the over 99. Like, that just shows you how gangster Gary Tonin is. So I think Gary should be the number 1 seed. I think he is the favorite. He's returning as a bronze medalist in the 77 kg, and 77 has always been the toughest division. So he beat Dante Leon in that 3rd place match. I think Gary's the favorite, but here's what's interesting about the 66. For the last decade plus, there's been 3 guys that have really defined the division. You've got Rafa Mendes, you've got Cobrinha, and then Tanquinho. Tanquinho was the champion. He's retired from UFC as well as grappling. So we've got just young up and comers. Like, there
so exciting
is an opportunity for somebody to walk away. I mean, obviously you've got Gary and AJ are kind of the old heads that have done multiple ADCCs. But other than that, it's just a bunch of young, hungry dudes. And I think that division's going to be fireworks.
And I believe on one of your podcasts, I think the ADCC Trials one, your number 1 seed was Gianni Grippo, who lost to Joshua Cisneros by knee bar. Is the reason why he's not in ADCC because of that loss and because Joshua Cisneros got invited? Was that kind of like the, I guess, big loss for him?
From my understanding, Johnny had hurt his leg pretty bad from that knee bar, and I think he had to take a few months off from training. So, I mean, that was you talk about a disgusting submission. I mean,
crazy.
I hope to God that never happens to myself. I mean, that was one of the nastiest ones I've ever seen. So I know he sustained an injury from that. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. And man, there's just a lot of young and hungry dudes. I mean, Josh Cisneros is outside of Gary Tonin. There, you've got Colabate, you've got Josh Cisneros, you've got Keith Krikorian, Ethan Krilliston, you've got the Brazilians and Pato and Gabriel Souza, Baby Shark, Fabricio Andre. Like, who knows who's going to finish in the top 4, who's going to make it to the the second day of ADCC. I mean, any one of those dudes could do it.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. I know Keith Krikorian came from San Diego. His flight was like delayed or something or canceled. Then he had to drive all the way over there, and he still managed to win the trials. So that just goes to show like the mental fortitude to get through all the different obstacles of traveling and competing at your peak performance. So crazy stuff happening in 66 kg. And then my second division that I'm most excited for is 77 kg. You have JT Torres, who's returning, but then you also have Mica Galvao, who's coming off of a big win at IBJJF, and everyone's kind of like not on this hype train because he's really good, but everyone's kind of like Mica right now. So who do you think is more of a favorite, Mica Galvao or JT Torres, or is it someone else on this list?
I'll say personally that Brandon has been just studying ADCC, getting ready to commentate. So he's been going back, watching all these dudes' matches in ADCC formats. And he thinks JT Torres is unbeatable in this rule set. So he thinks he's the guy. I'm taking Mica Galvao. I think Mica is, outside of Gordon Ryan, the best grappler in the world right now. He's the gi world champion. He's just no gi right now, tearing through people. I mean, he's submitting everybody. His jiu-jitsu is just beautiful. And he can tap you in so many different ways. Here's the thing about JT Torres, though. He hasn't given up any points in 2 consecutive ADCCs. I mean, that's almost unheard of. 0 points. And so somebody's going to have to take it from him. JT doesn't take a lot of risks. And so somebody's going to have to out-wrestle him. But I think there's some guys in this division that can give JT a run for his money and possibly beat him.
Yeah, we definitely have some 10th Planet representation here. PJ Barch, Andy Varela. So I don't really understand fully the invitation criteria. I know that most mentioned that if you don't do the trials this year, your chances of being invited are very slim. But is it because PJ and Andy got 2nd and 3rd that they were invited? Or is it kind of just like they have to fill out a certain amount of space, so they invite, the people who are most qualified?
Okay, so we have 8 trials. So for the guys, we have 16 spots. With the women, it's 8. Well, the guys, there's 16. The top 4 from the previous year get an automatic invite. So that would be in this division. We've got JT Torres as the champion. Wagner Rocha finished 2nd. Gary Tonin third, and Dante Leon finished fourth. So they got automatic invites. Well, Gary Tonin, as we just talked about, he dropped down a division, and Wagner Rocha moved up a division. So there's 2 spots that were open. Now we've got to look at, so there's 8 trials winners. So we've got 2 spots. So there's 6 invites. So there's 6 invites to work with. Now, typically they'll look at, has somebody medaled in the past and kind of what's their standing. Like if you've medaled, or especially if you're a former champion, that will get you an invite. So like Felipe Pena, he didn't do any of the trials or anything, and he lost his super fight to Andre Galvao last time, but he got an automatic invite. So if you've medaled at ADCC before, that's a huge deal. You'll likely get it. Now, in Andy and PJ's, and talking about them, Mo specifically said prior to, like, over the past year and a half, really since previous 2019 ADCC, he was talking about how he wants to make the trials huge. And if you want to guarantee yourself a spot, you should do both trials. If you don't win the first one, go do the second one. Now, Andy only did 1 trials, but he beat multiple guys. I mean, he beat Magid Hayes. He beat PJ Barch. He almost beat William Tackett. So he did enough. And then PJ Barch, same thing. He had a super close match with Kade Ruotolo in the East Coast trials. He lost to super tough Andy Varela, but he ended up taking third, beating Chris Wojak in the semis. In the third place match. So yeah, like I think as the future, and we've seen like the ADCC trials the past couple of years have been maybe the most difficult tournament to win. You got to win 6, 7, 8 matches. And if you have strong performances, you're going to win your way into ADCC.
Yeah, this card is so stacked, or this division in particular. I feel like it would be super interesting to see Kade versus Mica, just because Mica had just beaten Ty. But is there any dream matchup that you feel like the fans must see?
This is a division where it's like, I mean, I think
you can't complain no matter what. Yeah,
100%. I mean, I honestly want to see PJ Barch versus Andy Varela again. I loved their first match. They're both I like sometimes when 10th Planet guys go head to head, and both those guys come from different camps, so they don't train together ever or anything like that. And I thought their first match was fire. I think honestly, Andy Varela versus JT Torres is a match I really, really want to see. Andy Varela is just a dog, and he's doesn't back down from anybody. I mean, we've seen him compete against, Hasim Rita, like some giant dudes. And I think he is, Andy's my dark horse pick. I'm a huge, Andy's been on my podcast. He's a guy I talk to every now and again. Big fan of Andy's. Probably him, Keith Krikorian are like the 2 guys I'm like the most a fan of in 10th Planet. And it's tough for me to pick against them, but I think Andy's a dark horse to make it to that second day. But man, I mean, any match, like you just talk about William Tackett, like Nato Canuto, Dante Leon, any of those dudes, like every match they have, not even talking about Kade Ruotolo and Roberto. I think Roberto's a guy that, depending on his draw, like if he gets Lachlan Giles first round, like he might lose the first day. But if he gets a good draw, I mean, he could find himself in the semis and possibly making his way into the finals. So all I'll say is, do not bet any money on the 77 kg division, because I really think anybody can win that one.
Yeah, that's definitely a very exciting. Before we go to the next division, a quick question on, because I just remember I used to work with high rollers a little bit, and I still work with them on and off. But one of the champions, Kevin Crane, he would be calling out like specifically Andy and PJ Barch at like submission only type tournaments. So if he were to have gone in a submission only tournament and gotten like a big win, is that something that would influence like the judges or something at ADCC? Because I was just wondering why he was being so aggressive about like calling out specifically those 2. But now I'm thinking it was because they won second and third seed at ADC trials.
Yeah, I think in the past that was the way to do it. Like a lot of in the past it was, who have you beaten? But these days you've got to do well at the trials. And Kevin had that match against what's his name, Jacob Couch, and it was super close. We ended up losing, but he got knocked out either in the last 16 or last 8. And I really think to make it, you've got to make it to the semifinals of the trials. Like you've got to either make it to the finals, like get second place or third place to earn that invite spot.
Wow. Yeah, definitely a fun division there. And moving on to men's 88 kg, you have the returning champion with Matthias Dinas from Alliance. And then a couple people that I recognize that are invited. I got to interview Josh Hinger a while ago, super cool guy. Ty Ruotolo of Atos, and then a few of these other names that are all winners of the trials I'm not super familiar with, other than JT Rodriguez. So tell me, who's a name on here or a match you remember from the trials that you think I should go back and watch? It's like a highly entertaining back and forth fight.
So I would say if you're looking at 88, I like Giancarlo Bodani, and he's also a guy that's been on my podcast. But he's a new wave guy, and he's looked incredible. I mean, his trials performance, if you go back and watch him, like he had a match against Ryan Aiken. Ryan Aiken was the CJJ world champion, and Ryan's a beast. And Giancarlo, I mean, had a phenomenal performance. And his match against Elder Cruz in the finals is definitely a match everybody should go back and watch. So I think Giancarlo is going to do incredibly well. I think Mason Fowler is a guy nobody's really talking about. He's dropped down a division at 88. So he's the leanest I think I've ever seen Mason Fowler. So I'm super excited to see how he does there. Supposedly from people I know that have trained with him and competed against him, they're like, dude, physically, this dude is a freak. He is so strong. He holds multiple wins over Craig Jones. And I know that is EBI format, but still any win over Craig Jones says a lot about your grappling.
Hell yeah.
And I think Mason Fowler and Giancarlo Bodani are two guys that could find themselves in the semifinals, like in that second day. But to me, this division is all about two dudes, the Atos guys, Ty Ruotolo and Hulk. Whoever wins that match, in my opinion, is going to win this division. I am the biggest, like the Ruotolo brothers are my two favorite guys to watch. Like I love the Ruotolos.
I love the foot stomp they do. I'm like, I need to incorporate that somehow. I got a big feet. I need to be able to like pin people down with that. But I love, their style is so fun to watch.
I love those boys, man. And I hope, I'm really hoping they have strong performances, but I think Hulk and Ty are my two favorites to win the division, whichever one wins that match. And I like that ADC does that. Like I was mentioning last division where PJ and Andy, like they're not going to find themselves in the final against each other. They have to face the second match. Yeah. So teammates have to go against each other early. The last thing they want to do is have teammates have some bullcrap match in the final, so they make the teammates fight early on. And I like that. So we're going to see hopefully Ty versus Hulk. And I hope they just go to war. I mean, Ty fought his brother Kade, like they had a war. So I know he'll fight any of his teammates.
Yeah. So I was at IBJJF and someone was explaining to me that if two teams of the same team, like one of them would bow out and like honor, but is that just in the gi? Is that just a gi thing? Like you wouldn't ever see that in no gi?
So in ADCC, that's a lifetime ban. You cannot do that.
Okay.
So for instance, if let's just say me and you were teammates, all right, and me and you had a match at ADCC and they thought that we like, okay, hey, we're going to play it. I'm going to let you win and we're going to have an exciting match. Well, if they thought that and the rumors were that, you would receive a lifetime ban. No fake matches. And so teammates have to fight to the death. And anyway, so with IBJJF, though, that's not the thing. There's closeouts. And typically the senior student wins. And I personally just think that's the lamest thing ever. Like, wait, we're going to close out the finals? Like, they're not even going to fight for first place. And I think it's one of the reasons that honestly, like IBJJF hasn't reached the level of ADCC that's one of the reasons is nobody wants to see you close out with your teammate. We want to see you, we want to see who the best man is that day. And look, like,
exactly.
No, I mean, to me, like if teammates fight, like there should just be all love. Like, hey, we're going to go to war. And that just makes you closer.
Yeah. Respect afterwards for sure. And finally, before moving on to the next one, a blue belt like JT Rodriguez is in ADCC. So how does this show the whole tenacity versus technique storyline that flograppling has kind of been going with, like these young kids going up against people who are more technical? So who would you think would be the most technical matchup for JT Rodriguez And how much of a problem do you see it being?
J-Rod is one of those guys you have to watch his matches because he's a wild man. And he what's cool about the trials is anybody can do it. It could be your third day in jiu-jitsu. As long as you registered, you could go and do it. Any style. You could be a karate black belt and enter. Zero jiu-jitsu rate and enter. And so these guys that have a wrestling background and, obviously him and his brother have made quite a big name for themselves in this sport. J-Rod's had some really, really impressive. His trials run was one of the best in recent years.
Crazy.
I mean, where he took the guys back and he was standing and like yelling, like, oh, like, I mean, I got out of my seat and was like, yes, like this is amazing. So I'm super excited to see him perform. And I'm always, his brother was one of the stars of the last tournament, came in as a blue belt and made it to the finals and lost to Kade Duarte of Atos. So do I expect J-Rod? Do I think he can do it? I don't. I'm betting against J-Rod. I don't think he can make it to the second day, but I definitely think he can win a match and definitely give somebody as tough a match as they'll ever have, right? So if I had to make J-Rod like a first match, I would love to see him just go right off the bat against either Ty Ruotolo or Hulk Barboza, because I just think it would be
so fun.
Him versus Ty would just be an absolute war.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think he mentioned in one of his interviews that he wasn't even expecting or thinking he was going to win the trials at all. So he just completely surprised himself. So honestly, when you're going in there with nothing to lose, no pressure on you, I feel like that's just the time where that tenacity can come out and you can surprise some motherfuckers. So good for him. Obviously, very fun to watch. Then we go on to our final division over 99 kgs. We have Pertu Taponin, who's coming back. And then Rafael Lovato, who I got to see at IBJJF. He did his kind of retirement, but obviously it's not his actual retirement, just retirement from gi, I guess. I think a dream matchup for me would be him and Craig Jones, just because those are the two bigger names for me. But what do you want to see out of this division?
This division's got a lot of question marks. I not quite sure who the favorite is. I mean, you got Nicholas Marigali, who just joined New Wave. Him and Craig Jones. I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but in Flow Grappling, Marigali was saying that he would tap Craig in under 4 minutes, which, I mean, that's a statement right there. And do I think he could do it? I don't know. I am really hoping for a Craig Jones gold medal. I just think what Craig's done for the community.
But he wants the silver. He wants the silver though. He posted about it. He said, these silvers are mine. No one's taking them.
That's what I'm saying. I hope we can get gold medal Craig Jones. And here's the thing about Craig. He was in his first ADCC, he was the star of the show. I mean, he went out, beat or I guess his second ADCC, excuse me. In his first one, he got destroyed by Hamil Barral. Well, he comes back 2 years later. He beats Leandro Lo and in the first match and really just made a name for himself. That rear naked choke is one of the matches I think I need to watch one ADCC match to get ready for this one. Go back and watch Craig Jones versus Leandro Lo and understand. Rest in peace, Leandro Lo. So let me say that first. Leandro, an absolute legend, but Leandro's coming in as one of the greatest of all time, and Craig Jones takes his back and rear naked chokes him. And I mean, just upset of upsets, right? Kind of reminds me of Fionn beating Bia. Very similar in that kind of reaction Craig had of just like, oh my God, like I just rear naked choked Leandro Lo. But I think Craig versus Marigali is a match that needs to happen. Kade Duarte moves down from the over 99 kg into the under 99. And I think he's got to be the favorite. I mean, the dude is an absolute stud physically. You look at him, you're just like, the dude looks like an NFL athlete. He has already beaten Craig Jones. So him and Craig had a match up in New York a couple of years back, and he took his back off a leg lock and rear naked choked him. I think Kainen's the favorite with Nicholas Marigali and Craig Jones as kind of like the second and third. But I think Kainen's the guy in that division.
Very interesting. So that wraps up 99 kg. And of course, we're going to get into over 99 kg. I have a feeling that I probably can guess what your favorite is, but how do you think all of this competing is going to affect Craig Jones when it comes into the super fight?
You mean Gordon with the super fight?
I'm sorry, Gordon Ryan. Yeah, with the super fight against Andre.
So here's the thing about Gordon. And one of the things I think I like love or hate Gordon. I mean, Gordon does some things online that I'm like, yeah, it's not my style. But at the same time, you have to respect Gordon. Gordon, I remember when he first came onto the scene many, many years ago, I remember him calling out people and saying hey, I want to have back-to-back matches with these three guys, and we'll do it no time limit, sub only. And so Gordon has always pushed the envelope, from actually delivering envelopes at matches with his submission prediction. He just does things nobody else does. And so with this ADCC, he's doing his division as well as the super fight. Now, if he is able to accomplish this, he will, I don't care if you love him or hate him, the guy will be the no-gi GOAT. He will just do something that is almost unheard of. I just thought nobody would ever do that. Nobody has ever done this. But at the same time, I think this is a huge risk, because you've got some monsters in this division and some guys I think that might have a little bit of bad blood with. I mean, a lot of dudes probably have a lot of bad blood with them, with Cyborg Abreu. You've got Nicky Rodriguez was pretty, he was the only one from B team that was pretty open. I mean, if you go and look at it, I know he did a podcast or two where he was kind of talking about a cancer on the team, and everybody knows he was talking about Gordon. So of all the matches that take place, I want to see Nicky Rod versus Gordon. I think Nicky Rod, he's a silver medalist. Gordon's coming off of double gold. Both guys are physical specimens. There's some beef there. I want to see it. I want to see that match more than any of them. But at the same time, it's let's say Gordon has 4 matches and wins. Well, now he's got to go fight Andre Galvao. Andre Galvao's waiting in the wings. He's doing 0 matches. He's going to be fully fresh. Is that a mistake? I don't know. But that's what I love about Gordon, is he's willing to push himself, and he's willing to try to do things that nobody would honestly even attempt.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to take in, that he's going to have to try to win his division and then go on to the super fight. The super fight is going to be the very last thing on Sunday.
Yeah. So the super fight's an hour after. I think it's an hour, but yeah, it's the last fight. And the super fights, you're talking about 30 minutes. So the finals of ADCC are, his match with Buchecha in the final of the Absolute, for instance, that was a 30-minute match. So you're talking about doing 2 matches on Saturday, which I don't think is a problem, but then 3 on Sunday. And let's just say for fun that it's Nicky Rod, Felipe Pena, and then Andre Galvao. If he beats Nicky Rod, Felipe Pena, and Andre Galvao in the same day, I'll be speechless.
Yeah, there'll be no argument there. He obviously has a lot to prove. He loves to talk some shit, and I feel like that's so good for jiu-jitsu, because we need to make it more interesting. We need to have people that are really outspoken. So obviously, so much to look forward to this weekend. Can you tell us a little bit about the podcast that you are doing and where people can find you on socials?
Yeah, so honestly, here at 10th Planet Decatur, we've got a little social media empire building. We've got Brandon's channel, brandonmc.ninja. You guys can check it out on YouTube if you're looking to just follow kind of the daily life of what's going on at the school. So Brandon has that, and I'm featured on there, quite a bit. But then I've had my own podcast. I've actually got 2 podcasts. One I just started with one of my students who I'm really expecting big things from. He is incredibly talented. He's an MMA fighter, and he is getting ready to go pro. But I expect him to be in the UFC. He's incredibly talented, but I've got that podcast that's called Skaff and the Mantis, but there's only a couple of episodes. But then I have my own podcast that I do solo called The Grappling Discourse. And that podcast is more serious. I've got some interviews on there, but honestly, a lot of them are just kind of solo, my thoughts on certain subjects. We get into mindset things. The last 2 episodes have been more mindset based. We get into just how to improve. How do you improve as a grappler? How can you get better faster? I talk a lot about training, just tips and tactics that I've used over the years, things that have honestly hindered my development. I talk about that. And yeah, called the Grappling Discourse. There's over 300 episodes. So
yes,
I mean, it's an established podcast. It's not one of those, because I know some people like will start a show or podcast and they'll do like 5-10 episodes and then quit. This is like, no, like, I mean, I've been doing this for quite a few years, and you know, it's getting bigger and bigger every month. So yeah, check it out.
It's definitely reflective of the jiu-jitsu journey in itself. Like, you can't just do a couple classes and expect it to grow bigger. So I'm super happy that your channel is doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Skaff, if you want to follow him, I'll put a graphics with all his information here. And we can't wait to see you at ADCC this weekend. It's going to be a big one. Leave a comment below who you think is going to win in each division. We're very curious. And obviously, we'll just see you on Saturday.